Hello, everyone. Welcome to tonight's event, and thank you all for joining us, whether in person or virtually. I am from Trans-ilience, the Transgender Stress and Resilience Research Team at Michigan State University. We are a community engaged research team focused on supporting the health and well-being of transgender and non-binary communities by contributing to research, but also programming and educational events, developing community resources, and providing services to benefit trans and non-binary people, such as our name change program. We have brochures on the table by the front entrance, where you can find out more about our team and the work that we do. My name is Ashley Brooks. I will be our moderator for this event, and I will allow our panelists to introduce themselves.
Are we, okay, we're there. Everything's great, you're doing a great job. Okay, my name is Emily Dievendorf. I'm the current state representative for the 77th House District, which is much of Lansing, all the way up to St. John's, DeWitt, Grand Ledge. I'm also our state's first non-binary legislator, both in terms of gender, and I also identify as bi-pan. My background is the vast majority of it is in civil rights, working on immigration, LGBT rights, women's rights, HIV, racial justice, and those are still my priorities in the legislature, in addition to accessing our most basic needs. But I'm privileged to be here with all of you.
Hi, I am Axel Moss from Quality Michigan. I am Communications and Development Manager. I have a background in LGBTQ and disability justice. I've done quite a bit of political work and now trying to do a bit more advocacy and background support with communications and how we talk and make sure our messages are shared.
I'm Kyle Richard. I use any pronouns with respect. I am a community organizer and candidate for Lansing School Board. Done volunteer work with Run Too Damn High in Lansing and Lansing for Palestine as well. And looking forward to being here and looking forward to the discussion.
Okay.
Awesome. And then if you all are ready, we can jump right on in. So my first question for y'all, just to kind of get us started, what are some of the local and state items you guys think that voters should be really paying attention to this election cycle?
I am happy to start. My focus is, of course, on the state legislature, and we have made a significant amount of progress so far. This first term, we have passed the statewide non-discrimination policy to make it so you cannot discriminate based on gender identity, expression, or sexual orientation in public accommodations, public services, in housing. And we have also passed a ban on conversion therapy, a ban on the gay panic defense, which is an archaic defense used against LGBT folks. We have ensured that so many of our statutes are changed to gender neutral so that everybody is included when we are talking about our legislation. We have so much more to do. I am always going to be somebody that acknowledges the power that we have and the fact that we can use it. And we should be using the power that we have right now to be ensuring that all of our Michigan residents have access to meeting their basic needs, but also that our civil rights are level across the board. And we have a lot more to do about that. And it looks like we're going to talk about that in a little bit.
I think it's always important to, every election really matters, but when we go further down the ballot, we lose a lot of voters. By the time you hit this Supreme Court justices, we lose about 1 million voters, and those are justices who are defining your rights and clearly on the state. We learned that very quickly last election, the one before that the justices and judges have a lot more power than we usually give them credit or time and truthfully money to get the same amount of work done. So Supreme Court justices, I'm always going to highlight them, very important people. We have a lot of stuff happening and going through there and making sure that things in the statewide are put through that. Also school boards, we have seen a large influx of attacks on school boards recently, and it's important both I think often with school boards, people think, well, I don't have a kid, so I don't have to be involved. But you are going to be taken care of by every next generation that goes through these school systems, and how the community is educated is really going to impact the community you live in. So making sure that you're aware of there and things that are going on. And judges, I often tell people the more local, the more impact you're going to see. You're not going to really notice a tariff difference on GM, but you are going to notice if the kids at your school are getting the right amount of food, or if they have the amount of attention or resources they need. And so making sure that you're more aware of the local things happening in your community.
Yeah, there's gonna be a few questions here where I'm gonna lean on my fellow panelists. This is one of my really, I agree with pretty much everything that's been said so far. And I was excited to see the ban on conversion therapy, and definitely want to echo the importance of voting down ballot and making sure that when you do vote, you flip your ballot over. There's lots of races that are right on the back, and all of the millages are almost always on the back. And so that's, funding for schools, funding for libraries, it's always gonna be on the back of your ballot. And so make sure you flip your ballot over when you go to vote.
Yeah, especially nonpartisan sections, because even if they are not with political affiliation, the judges are going to decide if you get a parking ticket or not, or who's getting arrested or not. And so it's important that you are also looking at spaces where there's not a clear indicator and you might need to do some more research, but it is going to directly impact you. Supreme Court justices are nonpartisan and they very much have political leanings. So it's important to look at these spaces as well.
Before we move on, while we're talking about the other side of the ballot and the bottom of the ballot, paying attention to ballot measures that really do impact the way we spend money and our resources to take care of each other. And right now we have a committee ballot measure that would allow us to do better, more holistic funding for housing and homeless outreach and affordable housing. And we know if we're talking about the LGBTQIA community or all of our communities that are disproportionately impacted by discrimination, that is especially seen when it comes to basic needs like housing and maintaining shelter, but also in being able to afford those things. So it is absolutely essential that we fight for housing for all folks in all battles.
Yeah, so in that same vein, kind of my next point, you all kind of started to get into it. What are some of the issues that you see being really either important on this ballot or you think following this election? These are the things we need to think about because the people we're going to put in power are going to be making these decisions. So there are any things like that. We've mentioned schools, the experiences of incarcerated people, the LGBT community. This is a very big election also for the rights of immigrants and women as well. Are there things that you guys are kind of looking at as, we need to look beyond the election because this is going to be important?
I mean, there's a whole list of, housing policies that we've been pushing for. I guess there's on this list.
Yeah. We have a Renters Bill of Rights, which includes everything from fair chance, not discriminating against somebody because of criminal history, the right of tenants to organize. We have a right to counsel piece of legislation, because when tenants have access to legal counsel, over 90% of evictions just don't happen because they are negotiated to a solution. And we know that when an eviction does happen, the chance of somebody becoming homeless really increases. But we have a whole host of pieces of legislation to rebalance the power between tenants and landlords. I've also introduced a homeless bill of rights because as we are seeing this housing crisis unfold, we also have to acknowledge that we have folks that do not have a roof over their heads right now, are not going to be able to afford one anytime soon. Affordable housing is going to take a while to be built. And frankly, a lot of our governments, local, statewide, and national, are responding in knee-jerk ways to the housing and homelessness crisis, when really best practices say that the more and better we resource our unhoused neighbors, the more likely it is that when we get folks into housing, that stability will continue and they'll be able to hold on to that housing. But first, we have to make sure that they get the resources that they need. And
and I think I would also add that I think looking at the future and as a candidate for Lansing School Board, I would love to see some sort of state policy that says, if we're going to be building new schools, let's get a guarantee that every new school is going to have gender neutral bathrooms. Let's see in perhaps some sort of policies that we can, restructure current, existing infrastructure to include gender neutral bathrooms. Because I know that when I went to high school in Eaton Rapids, there was no gender neutral bathroom. And I think asking for one bathroom in the school doesn't feel like that big of an ask at the end of the day.
I think it is an interesting point, and I will make sure to hand it to you. You bring up thinking about who may come into power and how we need to respond to that. We should be thinking about what we need to have on the agenda. Should it look like some rights might be endangered, depending on who comes into power? And looking at it through that framing, I think that this fall, we really have to focus on immigration rights. We really have to focus on trying to check off the rest of these things related to our basic civil rights, but making sure that we retain what reproductive rights we have protected in Michigan and further secure our basic rights and our access to healthcare. I know on my list, I have a bill that also would allow our agricultural and domestic workers to organize and form unions, because that is the only class of worker. Those are the only classes of workers that aren't allowed to unionize in Michigan, and for pretty obvious reasons. The labor is absolutely necessary, but it's exploited. So we need to make sure that all of our workers can advocate for themselves. We still have yet to pass our hate crimes legislation. I have been working on trans sanctuary legislation for Michigan that looks much like Minnesota's, and we need to pass our legislation to make it easier to change your name as well.
Yeah, and Equality Michigan is a statewide LGBTQ nonprofit. I'm always going to talk about gay stuff. That's me.
I talk about it because I used to run Equality Michigan.
See, exactly. And so these guys know far more about like large things. I have a very specific scale. Number one, right now, we're trying to pass that name change bill. It's been something we've been working on. And currently, we're about to have a big shuffle of seats. And so that is going to depend on what we can do going forward. This also includes, like you said, there's going to be, it's such a change in like who is in what positions. We can't really project what the future is going to look like until these things are settled in. And so something I always try to remember people is like the election's choosing who's in the room, but you also get to be there. And I guess you're not slamming down the gavel, but you can go, you look kind of stupid right now doing this, and I'm going to call you, I'm going to text you. And it's very important that we continue this energy past these elections, because it really is a defining moment. But then the meetings start happening, and it's a lot less exciting. It's a lot more of agendas and minutes and the worst meetings you can imagine in your life. But it is important that you are in these rooms and taking up space, because your voices are also going to be heard in those moments afterwards. And just because certain seats don't go certain ways sometimes does not mean that it is the end all be all. There is still a way for us to have our voice heard and prevent damages from happening, and maybe even make progress in those spaces.
And advocates know that better than anybody.
Oh yeah.
I was with Equality in Michigan under complete Republican control, and I'm a very progressive Democrat. And there is no choice but to fight for your life and for suffering to be minimized and stopped for those who are suffering the most. It doesn't, as you said, it does not matter who is in charge, but also when you are engaged, you can at least stop harm a lot of the time, even when you can't move forward. So thank goodness for our advocates.
So I think that question about engagement is also really important. So what are some of the ways you all, I know, before we started, we had a conversation about things like door knocking and stuff like that. What are some ways that you guys think people can get involved in with that, with our current political climate, where a lot of people are very scared because there's a very real threat of violence, What do you think that kind of organizing has to look like so people can do it, but also do it safely?
What I always tell people is 3 main categories: time, talent, treasure. I don't know about you guys, I'm poor. I don't got money. I don't got a load of gold that I can give, but I do have plenty of time, and I do have plenty of skills. And so when this is my job. When I needed something else to do, I go to like an animal shelter. But like if you want to find something in this space, you can go to like politics. And there are plenty of groups that are already working on things. I'm personally not a door knocker. I'm a little too mean. But you can make a lot of space with texting, emails. You can reach out to other groups that are already doing this work, and they will simply give you a list and say, text 50 people. That would take a lot off my day. Sometimes it's things of like reaching out to these groups, and they need volunteers for events. They need abilities for people to do sometimes truthfully just admin stuff. We've collected all these voter cards and we don't have time to put it in a spreadsheet. Can you do that for an hour? And so reaching out to all these groups, I know, especially being an LGBTQ person and other marginalized identities, my wife and I have had many conversations of pride. If there's gunshots, you need to run the other way. Like that's a horrible conversation, but it's conversations we need to have. And so for a lot of people, I know being involved in more traditional ways is not going to be safe, but that does not mean that there's not space for you to do these things, especially with like accessibility. My wife is a wheelchair user, and so like going out and knocking doors isn't good for her, but she donates money from her paycheck each month. We take time to do like all these little extra things. And so it's making sure that it's accessible to other people who do not think these spaces are normally welcoming or inviting to them. There's still space for you to take up space and power.
Yeah, as someone who knocks doors, I definitely understand people's concerns about the safety issue on doors. I think that, like you kind of uploaded already, there is texting, there is phone banking. These are things that, I like to call couch canvassing.
Yeah.
It's the same, you're having a lot of the same conversations, but from the comfort of your own home. And then I think also there's community meetings where, there's space to kind of come together with other folks, with Runner Student High and other community organizations where oftentimes will have a hybrid option where you can tune in via Zoom or some other kind of digital option if safety is your main concern.
I mean, I think it's wonderful. We're a group of organizers, because organizers know that everybody can have a role in change. It really just does come down to what is the talent that you have,
Yeah.
and what most motivates you. Like you can find your little niche. So I know a lot of people that do not feel comfortable knocking doors. I love to knock doors, but I also know that I can access a lot of people by phone. And if I was somebody who didn't feel comfortable doing either of those things, there are a lot of grunt work tasks that need to be done in a campaign, that I am also willing to do. If you're in politics long enough, you've stuffed a lot of envelopes.
Yeah.
So there was always
Yeah.
a job somewhere. And you can gradually gain more skills. You're pretty much unstoppable as a change maker once you have conquered learning the campaign realm, the policy realm, and the community organizing realm. Come at things from all sides.
I think also remember that you have like, I know sometimes community going out can be hard, but community facing in can be good. No surprise, I'm the political friend to every person I know. And so a lot of people ask me, well, how do I register to vote? You can check in with your family members and be like, have you gotten your absentee ballot? Do you need help getting to the polling location? Do you have friends who like, okay, like gay people, we don't drive. I'm the only person in my friend group has a license. I go, okay, get in my car. We're going to vote on Thursday. You and I are going to early voting. And so finding ways to like organize in your community and especially the people around you, because the people who are around you are going to listen to you far more than they're going to listen to me, even though I may be a more expert. I don't consider myself an expert, but that's life. I don't think I'll ever consider myself an expert in anything. But they will listen to you, and having that connection gives you so much power to help just the people around you, and that is more impact than you can know.
It was the LGBT movement that really shows that storytelling makes a huge difference in shifting people in their positions. I always say that the data will help people to justify their shifted positions, but them actually shifting from one place to another only happens after they feel a personal investment. So you always have to provide both, and they're going to go to their colleagues and say, well, 90% of such and such. But then when they get up and say, this is why I had to do this, it has to do with those conversations that we have with our family and friends.
It's 100% relational at the end of the day.
Yeah.
That's awesome, I would say. And then transitioning a little more into just the voting part of it. We are, I think, just 2 weeks out from this upcoming election. We all can feel it. What are some things you wish people kind of just knew generally about voting rights in the state of Michigan? We'll get into it from a more like LGBT specific perspective too. But just generally, what do you kind of wish people had in the back of their heads when they're going to vote?
Yeah, same day registration would be my thing. If you're not already registered to vote, we've got Michigan is a same day registration state, and so you can go to the polls, you can register right there the day of.
You can register if you've had a felony. It has been frustrating to me to see that I've elected officials say, well, that person can't vote or won't be able to because of a felony. Like, no, in this state, we are really trying to make it possible for folks who who want to participate in community to be a part of change. I also would say, and this is partly the responsibility for current electeds, folks need to know that they have a role in getting people into office and then holding people in office accountable. But that, especially for LGBTQIA folks, we don't have representation unless we push for our own representation. Only this last term in the Michigan House did we have our first official LGBT caucus, and it's 7 people. And 7 people still isn't a lot. We are still fighting for a space in the conversation. We are all very different and have our own interests and priorities. But us being there makes a huge difference in us acknowledging what LGBTQIA folks need throughout the state. And we are a conduit for our communities to speak to the legislature, but that is not nearly enough. We need more and more LGBTQIA folks and folks who are from underserved communities in general to run for office.
Like you said, in voting for general, the main things I vote, we just recently started a permanent absentee ballot list, so you can sign up to get an absentee ballot for the foreseeable future. I know especially a lot of queer people prefer voting in private because it feels a lot more safer. You can drop it off or even mail it, and having the ability to have that reoccurring is very nice. We also have early voting, in-person voting, absentee balloting. Michigan really works hard to make voting accessible. And so know you have options. If you're not free on Tuesday, that's great. Come by any day, pick up a ballot. If you need to like do things differently or you lost your absentee ballot, you can still go in person and vote. And so know there's a lot of options, also specifically for trans people, but everyone in general. You don't need an ID or legislation or license to be able to vote in Michigan, and so you don't have to worry about that. You need to use your legal name if you're a trans person while voting and those things, but you still should be able to have access to that stuff and not be barred entry due to mismatching gender identity or ID first, like name and gender marker and things like that.
Although especially here, we should make sure that folks know that they will ask for your ID.
Yeah.
And that you are not required to give them your ID. If you left it at home, that's okay. You just sign the affidavit and you say, I am who I say that I am. Especially for trans folks, it is frustrating that there is even that step in the process when you go to vote where they ask for your ID. And that is part of why we are trying to change some of these laws, because we have tried to make it easier to change the gender marker on your ID. We're trying to make it easier to change your name on your ID, and hopefully we'll pass that later this year. But in the time being, I'm going to acknowledge that it can be an alienating and embarrassing process when somebody singles you out like that because you don't have your ID or because you don't want to show it. We need to remember that we can vote. Regardless, we can vote. You can sign the affidavit saying, I am who I say I am.
And this is why community support. Go with a friend, go with an ally who can be there with you, because I always know having someone who can advocate for you when things feel overwhelming is so important.
I love that.
Yeah, so to say, kind of along with that piece of, because I don't think a lot of people do know that in Michigan you don't have to have your ID. What are some other examples of, if you feel the need to bring documentation with you, what are just some examples of things that people can bring when they're voting?
Well, really, and I would say it's not, in Michigan, technically, you are supposed to have an ID. It's just a gray wiggle area. It's a wiggly wobbly area. So according to Michigan law, the ID is required, but it's not absolutely necessary, which doesn't really make much sense. When you vote by mail, an ID is not required. You request your ballot, you return your ballot. So that is another option. Other than that, you can't bring another form of ID in replacement of the picture ID. And have that serve the same purpose. But again, you don't need any form of ID. You can just sign that affidavit. Sign the affidavit, sign the affidavit, sign the affidavit, or mail by mail.
Yeah.
If you mail in your ballot, make sure you sign the envelope. There's been an uptick of people who have not been signing the outside of the envelope. And so please sign the outside of your envelope if you're voting absentee.
We see our clerks nodding.
Yeah, I say it should also match the name on the ballot, or that you have mailed the ballot with.
That is really good information for people to have, because I know, especially myself as a trans person, that's been a question of just like, what do I have to bring? What do I have to do? Because it isn't a thing that's laid out for you very well. And, whether that is purposefully or not is a whole other conversation, but it's just a reality of the experience.
And we could work with Equality Michigan on
Say,
next
if you
year.
go to our Instagram, I've created so many graphics about this. There's a specific one about voting while trans. So seriously, Equality Michigan, I spend hours designing stuff that like 10 people see. So please check them out.
Just send them always directly to me.
That's true, we'll do.
So then another topic that we kind of wanted to get into, which is another thing we talked about before we started recording, is kind of the prevalence of misinformation in this current election cycle at the local level, at the state level, at the federal level. Are there any places that you all personally kind of look to find information that is as unbiased as is possible in our current political environment?
That's a great question. I mean, there are a few best practices you can use. One source, don't ever consider enough. Look for validation in multiple sources and sources that seem to be reliable and consistent and don't inflate a story. The University of Michigan, I am a Spartan, but the University of Michigan does have a whole resource on how to identify fake news, and it also has a continuum where it shows where on the political spectrum different news outlets are. But it helps you to identify when there are fake news pages. There are a lot of people who are being paid these days. This is going to sound like a conspiracy. Get back to the conspiracy theories. There are a lot of people paid these days just to pull together a little bit of truth and a lot of just like fictionalized story that will help them sell ads on pages that look like news websites but aren't news websites. This is a real thing. It's interrupted whole elections before. So definitely check your sources, use tools like that. But I try to go and look directly through the data or look for confirmation of the data or the facts that are being shared in several sources.
It's so annoying that you have to be so critical of the things you read, but it really is what you should do. Normally, like, here's me as a person, as a queer person. It's so hard watching the news every day. My job is so political, I have to be aware, right? So I have one source where I kind of get, it's my newspaper for the day. I watch the Philip DeFranco show, and I get a little bit of news, and I'm a little sad for 30 minutes, and then I get on with my life. But then I also have resources like Ground News or like other direct sources where I can go get information. The Michigan Secretary of State website is my frenemy. We are besties and we hate each other. And it's very important that you're able to find like these primary sources where you're able to get direct information. Because it's so easy to make a website this day. Anyone can do it with a credit card, sometimes not even that. And so knowing that you're going to the direct places where the information is coming directly from the source or the primary source is very important, because someone can say election on Wednesday, but that's not true. But if it's the official people saying election on Tuesday, it's going to make it a bit easier to know that information and know that it's not, like you said, bits and pieces pulled together. Sometimes they make it look better, and I understand government websites are confusing, but they have PDFs. You can download them. It says it exactly in clear writing, and I promise it's going to be a lot easier for you to know that it's been vetted and over-analyzed than just put on a website without copy editing.
Yeah, definitely agree. Like, you're going to want multiple sources than just one. I know for local races, I've actually really appreciated the work of the League of Women Voters.
Oh, yeah.
They use a tool called Vote 411, and with that, you'll get they send out a questionnaire to all candidates, and then candidates send back their direct responses. And Vote 411 allows you to do side-by-side comparisons of different candidates' answers to individual questions.
Yeah.
And so it's a powerful tool. And so if you're looking for local stuff, League of Women Voters, Vote 411 would be my recommendation.
I second that.
All you have to do is put in your address and they'll pull up your whole ballot for you and take you through the whole thing step by step.
Okay, so those are all great sources, and I really appreciate all of your answers. Kind of along with that piece about mis or disinformation, how do you think you're seeing it affect this election cycle? Because I think there are people who kind of like see it and they're like, oh, this is weird. Things aren't normally like whatever, the mess that is currently happening is. But I think there are also people who are kind of just like, well, this is it. This is the chaos.
Yeah, but it's going back to what we were talking about before we turn on the recording. There can be a kernel of truth in so many things, but and then have something spun in a complete opposite direction. A lot of the things I get hit on are the things that I am the very most proud of. Making sure that you are confirming what the truth is without repeating the lie is really important, because people only need to hear a lie so many times before it becomes more believable than the truth. You never have to repeat that false information to clarify this is what real life is. I actually have one person in the district that answered the door to somebody running against me, and the person said, Emily is going to be a one-term legislator because of Emily's radical trans agenda. And the person was like, well, I support that too. And I'm not going to give energy to this. I'm not going to give energy to this. I'm not going to validate this. Instead, I'm going to treat the ridiculous like the ridiculous and the truth like the truth. And, thank you for your time. But we just have to be really careful about continuing to spread those lies. They stop when we are ready to stop them.
And I'll say, I've been knocking doors for a couple of weeks now, and I'll be knocking doors to the election. And there's definitely a lot of misinformation out there that people are kind of just trying to sift through. And part of the power of misinformation, or kind of the negative power of misinformation, is that it suppresses the vote, is that it gets to a point where people are like, I can't make sense of any of this, so I'm just not going to vote. And when people don't vote, what ends up happening is the powers that be continue to be. And so definitely do your research, multiple sources, talk to your friends, it's
Don't
relational.
humor the bullshit.
Yeah, big time.
Yeah, we always say in like our disinformation meetings I have of like you never want to like lift up something to dunk on it because then you're still lifting it higher and people aren't going to remember the dunk as much as they're going to remember the ball. And so it's important not to like be like, look at these idiots thinking blah blah blah, because that's not going to help. That's just going to spread the message further. And I think it's more fun to dunk on people than to be like, let's have a civil conversation about what's going on, how information's being shared. And this is such a me thing to say, but like this is the new printing press, right? Information is coming out so fast that we have yet to find a way to filter and legislate it where it is manageable. We are all being overwhelmed. There is no fact checking process. It took us a while to get to encyclopedias, right? Like it's taking us a while to get to this new what is fact and what is reality. And so I think disinformation is affecting everything. We're seeing issues with like FEMA and a bunch of other groups where people are not being able to get the aid that they need because there's misinformation that there are stuff, people coming to hurt when there's actually help. And so I think the best ways to like manage it is just not, like they said, knock it down when you can, but also like trust in yourself where this is because you will fall for it. I am guilty of it. Again, I look at this stuff every day. I should know this better than anyone. And yet I'm an idiot every day. And like I remember when we were trying to fix the hate crime bill, I had so many friends reach out to me because a Fox News article came out saying that they were going to fine people like $10,000 for misgendering someone. And so many friends of mine who I consider smart people were like, is this real? Why didn't you tell me about this? Clearly this is not real, but it happens. When you see something that confirms something you want to know and it passes all the vibes, it goes there. These AI calls are getting so good. Even I'm going, why is a Blue Cross nurse calling me before I go, that's clearly AI. Why would a nurse from Blue Cross call me?
I would say though that, go ahead if you.
Of just like being able to filter this information and knowing like it is hard for all of us and we are all falling for it. None of us are better than this, and being able to find the kernels of truth and being critical at every step, especially on your own things.
But we always have the power to make sure that the true narrative is out there and is dominating. And that takes us getting in front of an issue, doing the public education and helping people to understand why that demand for a change needs to be there or something needs to be protected, because it is easier to know what the truth is when we have already done the due diligence of educating people on the issue. The hate crimes issue that was just referenced, we certainly knew this was a policy that had to happen, but the false narrative just kind of took off on social media. And I'm going to take responsibility as a legislator who used to be an organizer. We as legislators could have done more due diligence to get out ahead of it and do education on why it was necessary, so that when that came up, more people could have sniffed it and knew what it really was.
Yeah.
And then kind of taking another transition to a little bit of a more positive note.
Love it.
With this conversation of disinformation and also just kind of the very palpable stress of this specific 2024 election cycle, as it feels like so much is on the line for so many different people. How does the average Michiganian, the average Michigander remain hopeful in this time?
I'm not going first.
I can go first.
Yeah.
Yeah, when I read this question, I was reminded of a lesson from my father. Both my parents are Navy veterans, and I think that's part of why I came up the way that I did. But this idea that if you are lost at sea and there's water all around, and if you think you're going to drown, you're going to drown. But if you think that perhaps this predicament will pass, not just that you'll survive it, not just that it's possible, but that you yourself are capable of it, you may still drown. But at the end of the day, you've given yourself a fighting chance, and that's what we need is a fighting chance. And so I would say, there's room for radical optimism in all of this.
I always think of I always tell my friends, they really want you to be depressed. More than anyone, I'm a trans person that's going to be crashed, but I'm going to say it. People want me dead. I'm well aware that a lot of people would be happier if I was dead. So it's really kind of cool that every day I wake up and I keep doing this stuff, and I'm going to be so happy that you're going to be so miserable that I'm so happy with my life. And so, yeah, the fact that this is how I make money and pay my mortgage is insane. I shouldn't be able to pay my mortgage on telling people I deserve human rights, right? I feel like I could be a graphic designer, maybe an architect. That sounds like fun. I would really love to draw things. I know that's more than that. My apologies. But I really try to find joy in the so many people have been oppressed. So many people have gone through the pain and hardship that I have, and I'm not the first person to have to overcome oppression. And that, like, I get to be so happy because people were doing all of these things for me, and someone else will get to be so happy someday because I did all of these things. And so I really lean into like community. You have to turn it off. This is coming from me. Once again, I work on it. I'm the worst person. I'm more critical of it than anyone else. But you have to be able to walk away at points and go, I really want to watch TV. I really want to go on vacation. I really want to look at my wife and go, I love you. And sorry, I've been working 60 hours a week. Like, you have to find that balance. I really encourage to lean into love and lean into community because, like, I find like when this is all chaos and hell, my happiest moments are like when I'm looking at my friends and being like, this is why I do it. I do it so you can eat with me. I do it so you can have insurance. And I do it so we can all call Michigan our home. And personally, Star Trek. Star Trek keeps me hopeful. Find a show or something to look at and be like, that could be it, baby. I could be on a starship and sad instead of here and sad. And so finding those little kernels of joy to just hold on to and kind of throw as, like you said, hopeful optimism in the future of like, that's what I'm working towards.
I'm gonna start this one out a little down, because real life.
Yeah.
I would say probably a year ago, I was at a trans-focused student event at MSU, and one of the questions they had everybody put an answer on a piece of paper was what makes you happy, like how you restore yourself. And I couldn't think of anything at the time because honestly, being our first non-binary person in the legislature has really sucked. It's been really awful, and not just from the opposite side of the aisle. And that's just what it is for folks from underserved communities. There isn't a lot of understanding, and you are pushing in the right direction, towards the right direction of history, but against all odds. And you have to be on the right side of history before so many people are willing to be. And honestly, there is a lot that you risk for that. So I had to learn after decades working in civil rights that working in civil rights or working for my own recognition of my humanity, I had to celebrate the small victories. I had to celebrate the benchmark victories. Whenever we made progress, we had to celebrate the progress because the pinnacle moment is way down there. I mean, that's just what it is. That's how human rights works, and that sucks because it is also the most logical argument that exists in the history of the world, that we should treat each other humanely and respect. So especially when you are pouring your whole life into that and it impacts whether you are able to survive, it can be very disheartening and depressing. So continuing to celebrate those little moments, but also remembering you are a whole entire person. I know when I was running in Equality Michigan, I still never turn the volume of my phone on because as executive director of a hate crimes responding organization, you are working until 2 a.m. every night. My neighbors next door in Lansing would see me in my dining room and text me and say, Emily, have you eaten dinner? I'm going to bed. But because I'm so used to chaos and crisis, I still don't have to have the volume of my phone on because if something flashes on the screen, my peripheral vision is going to see it. And that comes from trauma. The only way to balance that is to invest in those other parts of yourself that heal you. So I'm not a good artist, but I can make some really bad art and it really feels good.
Yeah.
And spending time in community with my LGBTQIA community, with folks that understand my life, always heals me from being in a really toxic place that is politics.
Yeah.
So making sure to fill in yourself as a whole comprehensive being and that your whole life is not fighting for yourself. There's a sweatshirt that I always look up and never buy because I'm too poor. And it just says surviving out of spite.
Yeah.
And I do absolutely feel that I don't want to describe to you what my emails say. They are graphic threats. And I was walking to work for a really long time and people like to tell me what they were going to do. And, I had to disconnect myself from that, but I also had to let myself celebrate the fact that, you know what, you're mad because I'm here. You're mad because I'm here and because I can make the change that is necessary that your hate doesn't want to see. And I'm winning. The right side of history is always winning. You just have to have confidence in your place there.
Do not disturb is a powerful tool for your
No.
I just started using it like a few weeks ago and I was like, oh wow, I can sleep well at night again.
No, those are all great points. And I do think, kind of as you all said, that self-care part of it is very important. I think, especially for people my age, college students, it's very easy to just wear ourselves out, trying to fight that fight without thinking about, like, I have to get up the next day. I gotta do things and be a person.
Something I tell myself is like, you're not the only person doing this, and someone else can handle it. And like, no one's going to die because you took an afternoon off, and no one's going to die because you went to the dentist. And like, so many other people get to live their life. I'm sorry, I want to have one weekend off. It's okay if I took a weekend off because I'm an organizer versus like Tim who goes drinking into casinos on Tuesdays. It's okay that I took a day off. And kind of like, you really have to change your standard because you judge yourself so much harder than everyone else.
Especially if you're doing direct service. Like,
Oh, yeah.
you're gonna do some piss poor direct service if you are exhausted. And when you are serving the most underrepresented and underserved who are already struggling, the bare minimum that they deserve, that we deserve, is that the folks helping us are at as full capacity as they can be.
Yeah.
They deserve the best of us, but that means we have to take care of us.
You can't show up for other people until you can show up for yourself.
Cool joke.
So then, one more question for you guys before we kind of get into our question from our audience member. What, along the line of hopes, what are you all also hoping to see specifically from a legislative point of view? I know we've kind of touched on things, whether it be funding for schools or the hate crime laws here in Michigan and things of that nature. What are some of those things for you guys?
Well, I have my heart and soul in trans sanctuary for Michigan, and it kills me that it's taking a while. It's going to take a while. We are going to draft and present a really fantastic policy that supports our trans community members, young and old. But we're going to make sure that we do it right. So that's why we are working with Minnesota. We're going to make sure that we have something strong for Michigan. But we also have to do the public education to get us there. So I'm really excited going into these coming years with the public education that we can do. Because one of the things that I have been blown away by, I was very spoiled to be surrounded by queer people for so long. Because to have folks that understand my life is such a pleasure when we are a minority in the world. So being in politics has such incredible stress, but it has reminded me how much more we have to do to educate folks on who we are, and that we shouldn't have to have our whole lives compromised just because of who we are. A lot of things that are logical to us, other folks have not even touched on trying to figure out yet. So I'm excited about that. I'm excited for how much potential there is for people to understand us and our lives and all the changes that will come from that, because it's just going to be dominoes after that. I also am really excited to get into HIV decriminalization and really working on curing AIDS. I don't know if folks know this, but here in the Lansing area, we have some of the doctors that are on the cusp of the cure for HIV/AIDS. And that is amazing, because I still have friends that have respiratory pneumonia so many times a year and are always just at the edge. And, we're competing with each other as to who is going to stay alive longer. But we still have to invest in that area.
Yeah, I mean, for me, if we're talking about legislative hopes, it's definitely housing issues for me. It's the Renters Bill of Rights. It's the Homeless Bill of Rights.
Should have pushed my own legislation.
Yeah, I'll push for it. I mean, housing is an issue that affects all of us. And I mean, at the end of the day, the rent is too damn high. And it's how can we rebalance the scales here? Because for a long time, landlords kind of have been able to wield this power over tenants in ways that are abusive, in ways that are harmful to everyday working people. And so I would love to see, I'd love to get to a world where people can just have a house, can just have a place to live. But I don't think that's going to be in the legislature anytime soon. So, but Renters Bill of Rights, Homeless Bill of Rights, these are achievable goals.
And in the meantime, we all are living in small apartments, I think.
Yeah.
Like we said earlier, the name change legislation, I'm really hopeful for that. I have changed my name legally 2 times, once because I'm trans, once because I'm gay and got married. And so let me tell you, it's a headache both times. I'm still working on the second one, and I'm just getting married. It's supposed to be easier this time. The liars. Yeah. So I would really love for that to pass. Clearly, it's not going to pass in time for me, but trust me, most of you are going to change your name at one point, whether or not you think you will. And you don't want the headache either. Trust me. There's a lot of other LGBTQ bills, like you said, sanctuary state sounds good. There's a lot, is wonderful. There's a lot of legislation we have to do to live up to the standards of being a sanctuary state. I will always weep for every trans kid. Now as an adult, looking back, realize I was a trans kid. I just didn't go through the transition until I was an adult. So I held myself to a weird standard. And so many kids are being punished, left behind, abused, used as political toys, and they're simply children. And I think there's so much more we can do to protect them, to make sure that they can go to school. I had to go to a tech school because I could not go to my high school. I was bullied to the point where I physically could not go there for my own safety. And a lot of kids are going through that. And a lot of kids are getting in trouble or losing their lives because of this. And I think it's beyond important that we are supporting not only these kids, but affirming them so that they are able to live their full lives and become adults like we all deserve. And yeah, endless legislation. There's so much we can do to be better. We have worked so hard in gerrymandering in Michigan to make sure that we are able to have government that reflects us, and it's important that we are making our voices heard, both on the election, but then showing up and saying, hey, are you going to pass that bill? Hey, are you going to pass that bill? Hey, are you going to pass that bill? Because trust me, they get annoyed quickly, and so few people call them. So if you keep calling them, you're going to have a great impact, trust me.
Yeah, I tried to tell my colleagues that I want them to be pestered, and I'm never insulted by advocates putting the pressure on. If advocates have to beg you for a logical, necessary change, I mean, it is a problem that you are causing. So thank you so much for that persistence.
For sure. And then I just want to say thank you all so much for your amazing answers so far. I really appreciate you all sharing the knowledge and information that you have and sharing your personal experiences. So we have one question that came from our community members anonymously, which is they want to know, where do things currently stand with the name change bill, which I know is something we were talking about.
Yeah, so I am on the name change bill package. My bill is actually to make it easier to change your name regardless of gender with a marital change. Which really benefits my ex-husband on it. Because it was rather easy for me at the time. I hope he changed his tattoo as well. But that package is currently in the judiciary, or it's passed out of the Judiciary Committee. We already had a hearing on it. We already passed it out with recommendation. It's sitting on the House floor waiting for a full House vote. So it would need to go through the House and then the Senate, but it already made its way through 1/4 of that journey. And it is an entire comprehensive package that makes it easier to change your name regardless. Currently, one of the biggest issues with name changes in Michigan is that you have to sign a document saying that you are not changing your name in order to commit fraud. So we should not be leading with the assumption that people are trying to create fraud, trying to commit fraud. So that we are removing that and making it so that you simply just have to say that you would like to change your name.
Awesome. Anyone else have any input they want to give on that one, or do we feel like that summed up things up pretty succinctly?
You did a great job.
Yeah, that's where it's at.
Thank you. Again, thank you all for participating. Thank you to everyone who came and watched. I really hope that everyone felt like they got some nuggets of wisdom out of this and more information they can take on the world.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to use that dunk.
Thank you. Metaphors are my specialty.
Thank you.
Awesome.